guys, so in this video we'll be looking at forces. So just a heads up, for those of you that are going to do physics in grade 10, 11 and 12, this is basically a great introduction of what physics entails, especially for grade 10, because you deal with like Newton's law and like a lot of forces. So if that's something you want to do when you go into grade 10, this is basically an introduction to that. So first, we're going to start off with what is a force before we can look at the different types of forces. So it says here, a force is a push or pull on an object. So let's say you have a ball on the field and then you kick it. That is a force. You kicking the ball, that is a force. Or let's say you are pulling a table across the room. That pulling is a force because it's acting on an object. And we always measure force in newtons. I don't know if you guys know about Sir Isaac Newton, the guy that he was sitting under a tree and like an apple fell on his head, something like that. So he's the one that force is named after. Force is measured in newtons. And then we have effects of forces. We have three, where number one says forces can change the shape, aka the deformation of an object. So let's say when you were younger, you used to play with Play-Doh. I don't know if you kids of today ever played with Play-Doh, but when I was younger, I used to play with Play-Doh, and obviously you'd like squish it, or like even dough for like making pizza and all of that. You can squish it. You squashing it or squishing it is you applying a force on that object. You are changing the shape of it, because after you squeeze it, it's not going to be the same shape as it was before it was squeezed. So that's a force. And then the second one says forces can change the motion of an object. Motion is basically moving it. So if you have a ball just sitting there doing nothing and you now kick the ball, that is a change of motion, because at first it was just stationary, it wasn't moving, but you applying a force on it and kicking it, and now it's moving forward, it has changed the motion of the ball. Then we have number three, where it says forces can change the direction of an object. You can kick a ball in different directions, left, right, at any direction. So that's basically the different effects of forces. And then now just to note, this is going to be also more detailed in like grade 10 physics. It says when an object is moving, we say it has velocity. This is when like a lot of learners get confused with like speed and velocity, because in physics we deal with mainly velocity. There's like I don't know how many formulas of velocity. If I can find them, I'll show you, but we mainly deal with velocity. So what is velocity? Velocity is the rate of change of the position of an object. And velocity is the speed of an object and the direction which is moving in. Speed is just basically how fast something is going. But velocity is speed and the direction that it is going in. So let's say it's going south at, I don't know, 90 kilometers per hour. That is velocity. Whereas speed would just be 90 kilometers per hour. Velocity is speed and the direction which the object is moving in. And then we have something called acceleration. For people who have started driving already, you should have a background of this. Acceleration is when the velocity of the object is changing over time due to a force acting on it. This is going to obviously be discussed more in detail when you do grade 10, but this is just to note, just to give you an understanding of how forces work. Okay. Now we can move on to action and reaction. So let's say that you are pushing against a wall and you're exerting a force on the wall, and the wall is exerting a force back to you. So let's say it's after break and you are lining up at your teacher's classroom, and then you're leaning against the wall. You're leaning against the wall, you're exerting a force on the wall, and since the wall is not falling over, it's exerting an equal but opposite force back onto you. Okay, so this is when forces act in pairs, and Newton called the one force action and the other force reaction. Excuse my drawing, I don't know how to draw like someone pushing against the wall, but just imagine your hand or your body is pushing or leaning against the wall. That is an action, and since the wall has not fallen over, it is exerting an equal but opposite force onto you, which is the reaction. That is basically what action and reaction is, when there's an equal amount of force between the action and reaction. Okay, so when forces are equal to each other and opposite in direction, they balance each other, and the net force is 0 newtons. I know it looks like the word on written in capital letters, but it's 0 newtons. That is the net force when forces are equal in each other and in opposite direction. Like I said, you are leaning against the wall is exerting an opposite but equal force onto you. Okay, then when forces are acting in opposite directions but aren't equal, the net force is greater than 0 newtons, and there is a resultant force. So for example, let's say you're having tug of war, and you have let's say 3 people on one side and then 4 people on the other side. Hypothetically, let's say the people on the 4 people that are pulling the rope, obviously they're pulling it towards them, which means they're exerting a larger force than the ones that are on the other side that have 3. So since there's no equal force there, the net force will be greater than 0 newtons because it's not equal. But if it was equal, and let's say there was 3 people on one side and 3 people on the other side, it would then be 0 newtons. Why? Because it is equal and opposite in direction. Okay. And then it says, if the forces are equal and acting in the same direction, there will also be a resultant force. Okay. So now we're going to move on to how we represent forces, because physics has its own type of art that it has when it comes to drawing things. Okay. So we have here our object. This is just a normal drawing. This is our ball, which is our object. And then our line with an arrow here is showing the force direction and the size. So this line here is for the force direction and the size, and it's pointing which way? Right. Or it's pointing east. And then obviously, I didn't write the force size, but the longer a force is, you must indicate that with the line, because you can't show 1 newton in a line so long like this, or 100 newtons and then a line so short like that. No, it has to like represent the size of the force to show that, okay, this force is large, this force is little. And I have here a great example of that, where I have 3 newtons here, which are a very short line. Then I have 11 newtons here, which are with a longer line. Can you see they're not the same? You can't draw the same length of a force to indicate different forces. That does not work. It doesn't look right. Okay, so this is an example I was talking about, where we have tug of war here. This is our rope, and then these are our people. They are exerting a force of 11 newtons. They're pushing it more that way, and they're exerting a force of 3 newtons, which are pushing it that way. So to calculate the net force, remember what we said. If the forces are not equal, obviously the net force will not be 0 newtons, so we'd have to calculate it. So it will be 11 newtons plus, and then I don't know why I wrote a 6 there. It's supposed to be a 3. Sorry, it's supposed to be a 3 because 3 is there. So we have 11 newtons here to represent this. Then we have minus 3. Why? Because it's going in the opposite direction. It won't be 11 newtons plus 3 newtons. It's wrong because it's going in the opposite direction. If you can remember your number line with negative numbers and positive numbers, that's exactly what we are doing here. Okay, so obviously 11 minus 3 will give us 8, not 4. It's supposed to be 8 newtons to the left, because remember we always have to show the size and direction. If you just leave it as 8 newtons, it is wrong. If you just say to the left, it is wrong. You have to show the size and the direction. Okay, so that is just a basic understanding of what forces are before we go into the different types of forces. So in the next video, we'll be looking at the different types of forces: contact forces and non-contact, aka field forces. Bye.